I started hosting, marijuana was illegal, and you could smoke cigarettes any place you wanted.
I believe he did the greatest monologue ever, and I think it was because of his political sensibility.
And the worst thing about losing this job, I'm no longer covering NBC. I'd have to sign up for Obamacare. Welcome to The Tonight Show.
After 22 years as the host of The Tonight Show, Jay Leno said goodbye to late night. Though he was no favorite of TV critics, Leno held the top rating spot for over 2 decades after succeeding the legendary Johnny Carson. ReasonTV sat down with longtime Leno producer Dave Berg, author of the book Behind the Curtain, an insider's look at Jay Leno's Tonight Show, to discuss Leno's legacy of elevating politics and late-night talk.
Johnny Carson, who of course is a legend, the greatest there ever was, he set the bar very high for all of us. However, Johnny emphasized entertainers on his show. I'm not saying he didn't have politicos from time to time. He did, but the emphasis was on entertainers. Well, the strategy that we used to kind of expand and maybe get better ratings was to move beyond entertainers. And I think that this is what distinguished Jay, not only in the guests that he chose. I mean, basically, we had every major presidential candidate from 1996 on. But also in his monologue, which he expanded it from Johnny's was 7 minutes, and Jay expanded his to 14 minutes and added a lot of political humor. He set the pace. I believe he did the greatest monologue ever, and I think it was because of his political sensibility.
You talked about having presidential candidates, but you guys were actually the first to get a sitting president when you had President Obama on. Can you talk a little bit about the story of how that happened? 5
years before he became president, I was watching him speak at the Democratic Convention in Boston. That was in 2004. Kerry was the Democratic candidate that year. And I had never heard of this unknown senator from Illinois. And I thought, oh my gosh, this guy is the best speaker I have seen since Ronald Reagan. I'm not talking politics here. I'm just talking about the ability to communicate. And I was very impressed. And the next day I started calling on his people to express an interest in getting him on the show. Now, we did finally land him on the show as an author, The Audacity of Hope, when he was a presidential candidate. So when he did finally agree to appear as a president, he had already been on, he had already had a trust, and a kind of a chemistry with Jay. But nevertheless, when he decided to appear on the show on his 59th day in office, that was amazing because no other president had ever appeared on a late night show. It was actually considered unpresidential.
That was a huge moment, and looking back at that, why do you think it took so long for that to happen? I mean, do you think that politicians are kind of afraid of going on platforms like that because they're afraid of being made fun of?
I do, and as I always told the political people, actually, we're much easier. I'm not saying Jay didn't ask tough questions. He did. He certainly did. But we weren't meet the press. And Jay's attitude about guests is he believed that it was a family environment at the Tonight Show, and he actually acted as though guests were like guests in his house. So he always said, I'm not going to throw you a curveball. You don't have to worry. I will ask you a tough question. I'll ask you this. I'll ask you that. But he never asked gotcha questions. So we were actually easier than meet the press.
It never seemed like he was really accepted among, the comedic elite. And here he is now. He's going to get the Mark Twain Humor Award at the Kennedy Center this fall. What do you think is so misunderstood about his success?
I think that the critics, the television critics, basically early on, starting when Jay took over from Johnny Carson, early on they said, this guy doesn't have the chops. He doesn't have what Johnny Carson has. And by the way, he's not cut from the same fabric as David Letterman. David is so much more edgy. And they are the ones that basically set the tone for how Jay was perceived among, if I may use the word, among elitists. Not among the folks who live in the flyover states, those wonderful flyover states, but among the elitists who felt that Jay's humor was much too milquetoast. Actually, I think Jay's approach was exactly what it should be. What you want to do is you want to tell jokes that appeal to a broad band of viewers. We weren't narrow casting. We were trying to reach a wide group of people. And I think Jay did that very successfully. And I think the Mark Twain Award is justification. Finally, Jay gets the credit that he deserves.
And I know a lot of people, would always try to tie a political label to him, but, because we have more of a libertarian audience, do you think kind of that independent streak that he was more working class, he worked really hard. I know you talked a lot about his work ethic in the book. Do you think that kind of came through, the fact that he was just a little bit more independent, and that's maybe why he broke through to such a larger audience?
I definitely do. And again, I think you could see it in his monologue jokes. I think that resonated with people. I really do. The fact is, in the last 2-3 years, none of the other late night hosts were doing Obama jokes. Well, Jay happens to like President Obama, but his feeling was, you got to go after who's ever in power. And he alone was doing jokes about Obama for a long time. Finally, when Obamacare, became the disaster that it was, at least for a while, the other hosts started following suit.
Do you think that his willingness, because I see it now with Kimmel, and a little bit with Fallon and Letterman, they've kind of followed suit, but do you think that that is kind of one of his main legacies as far as, being an equal opportunity offender?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, I really think that distinguishes him. And yes, if I understand your question properly, there doesn't seem to be a healthy skepticism of those in power. And that concerns me, because late night is so influential, especially among younger people, I think.
Yeah, and there's also kind of this, I guess you can call it a PC movement going on, where you've seen a lot of comedians lately having to, apologize for jokes. How do you think that affects the material, or did it really come into play when he was crafting his monologue?
That was a big problem, and I have to say, that among the comedy writers and comedians, whether they were liberal or conservative, they hate PC. They do not like political correctness, because that restricts them in their job. And that was very damaging, and it hurt a lot of jokes. We had to sort of water down some of the jokes. Everybody did. And I think everyone suffers as a result. You're missing satire. You're missing good satire.
When you look at who's out there now, you have Kimmel, you have Letterman is stepping down, you have Colbert coming in now, and now you have Jimmy Fallon. Who do you see kind of emerging as that standard bearer of being the top dog?
I actually am a Jimmy Fallon guy, and I like Jimmy Kimmel. They're both really good. I watch them both. But Jimmy Fallon, when he took over for Jay, honestly, I did not want to like him. I didn't like the fact that Jay was, being let go when he was doing so well. But when I started watching Fallon on a regular basis, he won me over. And I like him because he continues with that really positive, upbeat attitude that Jay represented. And he has brought kind of a new perspective. He has redefined late night on his own terms. Now it's about comedy bits. It's about performance. The guests get involved. They want to get involved. Jimmy gets involved because he's so talented, and he has done very well. I would go so far as to call him the king of late night. He's going to be the guy to beat. That's my feeling.